everybody, and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Elves versus Ogres. This battle is a continuance of my Emerald Dragon GT prep, so it is 1950-ish points with special dragons on each side. And the scenario this time around was Dominate. So first off, we have my opponent's army, which opens with 2 hordes of boomers, a horde of Garrock-a-Gamok's finest braves, 2 hordes of Siegebreakers, one of whom has the Staying Stone and the other has the Blade of Slashing, Garrock-a-Gamok himself, no more Garrock, 2 Red Goblin Bigots, both of whom are mounted, a Warlock with Aura of Heroism, and a Red Goblin Blaster. The special dragon my opponent decided on was Shenron for this list, and Shenron's appeared before, so I'm just going to go over a few of the things I like about it. First off, Shenron's always nimble. That's a that's a big difference, so you have to have Phalanx and Disorder if you want to turn off its ability to nimble away. It has the Winds of Gozra. I believe that has been changed to being a 5-inch bubble instead of a 6-inch bubble. It gives all units, including friendlies, +1 speed. The second sentence I think is irrelevant because in Kings of War you measure to see whether you're in a charge distance before you move, and the second you're in. Doesn't matter what your speed is later. Then we've got Wish, which is you get to reroll a single die roll in the game. Generally that's used to make a double one have to be a triple one, but in this case it's also good for the Red Goblin Blaster because that's a big single die roll, right? So that radius going from a 2-inch to a 3-inch could be enormous, giggity, but yeah, and then we still have Chain Lightning being a problematic rule, I think, because it comes from the center point of Shenron, and it hits friendly units, meaning that Shenron fires this gun, and it hits itself. So that's a problem, but we did not play it that way in this game, and I doubt anyone will in the tournament. So my thoughts on the army itself, I think it's a fairly middling army. My opponent generally plays my elves. He does own models of him for himself, but generally likes my elves, and obviously I'm playing them, so instead we just threw together a list using my ogres instead. It's an okay list. I think the biggest problem with it is that Garrock-a-Gamok is in it. It's just 1950 for a 260 point model. It's a little much. It's a little too top heavy, but Garrock-a-Gamok is such a fun character that I couldn't just give him an ogre list without Garrock. So anyway, moving forward, this is my elf army. It's the same thing as last time. It opens with 2 hordes of Kindred Archers, one of whom has the Heart-Seeking Chant, the other has the Chant of Hatred, so the Chant Bros. Then we've got 2 regiments of 4 Shamblers, a horde of Draken Riders with the Proof Strength, a regiment of War Chariots, an ASB with the Diadem and Dragonkind and a mount, an Elven Mage with Alchemist Curse 10 and a mount, double Princes, both of whom are mounted with Saber-Toothed Pussycats, and finally, a Tree Herder bringing up the rear with Blessing of the Gods and Blizzard 2. Of course, in this list, I brought Nyx, so it's the same list. It's fully painted now. So it's probably the models are not going to change. I haven't done the basing, but all the models are painted. So yeah, that probably won't change. I might slide around some items just to try them out, but anyway, this is the list now. So let's go on to the battle. First off, let's talk about Dominate. So you might be thinking that this is the dead center of the table. It's not. It's like here instead, so cool, Matt. So anyway, Dominate is a pretty simple scenario. You have a dead center of the table and then 12-inch radius from that center. You draw a circle. Great job, Riley. So yeah, you're just trying to get the majority of a unit's footprint into that circle so you can dominate it at the end of the game, so highest unit strength wins. This is an example of a scenario that I think is fairly weak, and it's mostly weak because it scores at the end of the game. So my list is very gun heavy while my opponent is very aggressive. So yeah, I don't have to do anything till the late turns in the game. I can just sit here and shoot, or were I like a Ratkin or a Goblin Force, I could push forward, especially Ratkin because they're speed 6. I could push forward and just zone my opponent out, so create a tar pit or bits of jamming with other armies by running flyers over, right, and stopping someone from moving in. So I think it's an example of problematic game design. Personally, I would do something more akin to War Machine. You're going to hear that a lot because I worked a lot. Anyway, I did a lot of the playtesting and game design back in the day for them. So I would do something more like a zone here and a zone here for dominate, where I'm trying to get into this left zone, right? And my opponent's trying to get into this right zone. So and then score every turn, probably starting on the second player's second turn, just to make it so the choice between first and second has a bit more of a difference. So you start scoring. I need to dominate this left area, and then I need to protect the right area. So you can, sort of decide as the game goes on whether you want to protect or if you want to attack, or meow for additional snack, whatever you want to do. So it makes it a bit more varied. You're going to hear some planes overhead as I'm leaving the windows open in solidarity with my British brethren. You go, heatstroke victims. So anyway, I don't have any pictures of the armies this time around because, you might think, yeah, of course he does, because these are fully painted lists, but I was very tired. I had been up for about 50 hours when I played this game, so Starting on the left for the ogres, we've got the first Red Goblin Big Get. Next to it is the Red Goblin Blaster with a wide berth given. Then we have the first horde of Siegebreakers. These are the ones with the Blade of Slashing. The Yetis are Siegebreakers. I do have some Siegebreaker models of my own, but they are very heavily converted. They're almost entirely green stuff and plastic card executioners, and I only have 4 of them. Making them is a huge pain in the butt, so it's unlikely I'll make any more. But anyway, so the Yetis are Siegebreakers today. To the right of the Siegebreakers, that is the first horde of Boomers. Right behind them, this is Nyx, the dragon. And then to the right of those Boomers, we've got the Warlock with Grokkagamok behind him. Then we have the second horde, or no, this is Grokkagamok's finest Braves. Then we have the second horde of Boomers. Nope, those are Siegebreakers. Sorry about that. The second horde of Siegebreakers, these are the ones with the Staying Stone. Right behind them is Nomar Garok. And finally, the second horde of Boomers. I think over here in my opponent's dice pile is the second Red Goblin Big Get as well. I know that they're behind this. Maybe this is them? Anyway, they're behind this building somewhere. So... Oh, I forgot to talk about the terrain. Let's do that real quick before I get into my thoughts. So starting in the bottom right corner, we've got a height 6 forest. Right above that, we have a height 6 building with a height 1, or a height 6 impassable with a height 1 obstacle attached to it. Right below it, we have a height 4 impassable. Then we have a height 2 hill to the left and above. Then we have a height 2 hill with a height 1 obstacle attached to it, a height 6 forest, above that a height 4 house, and finally in my deployment zone, since I didn't do this very well, we have a height 6 forest on the left, and then in the dead center a height flat piece of terrain. So terrain is a bit obstacle heavy, or impassable heavy, which is good for me. I think I have more flyers than my opponent and a lot of guns, so yeah. Anyway, for my opponent's deployment, it's a very central deployment. I do this a lot with ogres. I don't think it's a good idea. Even in Dominate, I would have taken ooh, did I win the roll-off for sides? Because there's impassables on both sides here. Not the best, but I probably would have set up a bit more like this, and face towards the table. Obviously, you can't deploy over here, but you get the idea. So, anyway, going to the elf deployment, starting on my left, we have the Regiment of Chariots with the Fire Oil. Then we have the first Regiment of Shamblers, the Wizard with Alchemist's Curse, the first horde of archers. These ones have the Heart-Seeking Chant. Nyx, of course, the Tree Herder with the first prince behind the herder. Then we've got the second horde of archers with the Heart-Seeking, or not the Heart-Seeking, Chant of Hatred. Then we have the second prince. Over here on the right, we've got the second regiment of 4 Shamblers, the horde of Draken Riders, and finally the ASB is right there in the woods. So that's the elf deployment. My idea is just to set up a fire base here, and then this side of the table will just swoop around, right? Same thing with the chariots. Since my opponent has not deployed very strong wings, I can do that. And yeah, let's see how it goes. Moving on to turn 1. Actually, here's turn 1. The ogres win the roll-off. I did decide to vanguard in the interim, so I move forward with the Shamblers, the Tree Herder, and the Shamblers, just to make sure that it can't be charged, but they can shoot me if they want. The ogres just sort of run forward. We've got the red goblin big git here just going around the woods. Pretty good plan, because you don't want, generally speaking, you might go like, oh, I want it in this wood, right? But in reality, not so much, because it wants to be charging on turn 2 against elves. So putting it over here, it only really has the chariots, but it makes it so if the wizard moves forward, you know, it can get charged or it can go into the chariots, and it's still at -1 just for being an individual for anything that's not Alchemist Curse or Nyx, so pretty good. The battle wagon here runs forward. I probably would have actually run with it. I doubt that's as fast. Let's walk a picture back. Yeah, this is not a run. I would have actually marched and just gone directly forward 10 inches, right? But my opponent does not, so meh. This is their first game playing ogres, so you know, there might be a few errors. The siege breakers run forward. That's a pretty good plan for siege breakers. The boomers do not go all the way forward, and this is interesting. Keeping the battle line like this, it makes them so they're out of range of the tree herder and anything else. You know, Nyx can't charge them. So that's a good bit of positioning. We've got the warlock taking King of the Hill here. I'm not sure I would do this because the warlock is not protected. If you were gonna, I don't know, I probably would have maybe kept Grok's Finest Braves or moved the dragon or something in front of the warlock, right? Because right now it's height 4 and these guys are not 50% on the hill, so there's no line of sight blocking. So anyway, then we've got, the battle line here with the boomers bringing up the flank. Another thing, I probably wouldn't have put the boomers, I like to put my boomers together, right? That way if one gets charged, you know, so it's all the guns on one side, so they all shoot, or put the boomers inside, so put maybe the siege breakers on the outside, but I can get why you wouldn't, because they're a little slow. But anyway, then we've got the red goblin big git whipping around the house to get in the way of the shamblers, and the Shenron just sort of running over here with no more Grok. I think Grok is behind this unit here somewhere, pretty far back. So again, I like playing Grok pretty aggressively against a range-heavy army. Obviously, you don't want him in line of sight because he's still only a 15-17, so I can just take him off the table. But, you know, maybe behind these siege breakers, just forward a bit more. So that is the movement for the ogres with their mighty shooting. This goblin fires into my chariots, ends up doing 1 wound, so that's pretty good. And then this goblin just misses all its shots versus the shamblers. And finally, the warlock casts Aura of Heroism on itself to get that rally bubble out. It ends up having rally 1, but giving itself +1/+1 nerf, pretty good. And that's it. Let's move forward onto elf turn 1. Oh, nope, here's the 1 damage. It doesn't get a boxcar to wave at them, so moving on. Turn 1 elves. So the elves advance forward with a fair amount of the army. I've advanced forward with the mage to the edge of this building, so if the red goblin big git wants to charge me, they'll be hindered. But I'm just within 12 of this wagon to hit it with Alchemist Curse. So the wagon is def 5, but it's only an 8-10 nerve. So if I blow it up here, I would really like to blow it up here. I also have the chariots ready to shoot. It's unfortunate that the wagon is only a height 3 monster because this wall will give it cover, but the woods might have given it cover anyway. So anyway, I move forward with these archers just to get them 50% on the hill so they can shoot at what they want. That'll probably end up being the boomers or maybe this warlock. Depends on how much damage I get onto the warlock. Then I take the tree herder. I believe I back up 3 inches to stay out of charge range. I move Nyx to where you're seeing her now, and then these archers don't move at all. Both the princes move forward here to throw battle cats and get in the way. So this prince is not in the way, but I plan to just... So I threw these shamblers in instead. So the shamblers charge into the boomers, turning off their shooting, and then also they'll die, right? These siege breakers in their flank and, you know, a dragon, all this stuff. They're gonna die, but them plus this house is blocking my opponent from actually turning towards the right where the dragon riders are, which is pretty good for me, obviously. This prince is just making it so nothing can get through except for the red goblin. If the big git wants to ignore me and run through, that's fine. Although Yeah, they could run this way, I want to say. But it's going to be a bit of a slalom, right? Because they're going to have to go forward, then pivot here, then go this way, then pivot here. So they'll be facing like this at the end. Not that it's hyper relevant, but it's slightly. I move the Drakens basically directly forward and give them a pivot here, just to face down the line towards the center, since it's an Ogre list. I mean, getting those flank charges with flyers, obviously good, and they push forward so far. I can do this. And that's about it. Let's go into the action shot. Yeah, just the wizard getting ready to do it. And here is the end of the turn. So a bit of an angle here. So first off, we've got the wizard and the chariots, which are off picture now, shooting into my opponent's battle wagon, the red goblin. Man, why can't I remember the exploding wagon, I'm gonna call it. So the wizard ends up doing 4 wounds to it, which is great. The chariots do 1, putting it on 5. I need not double ones to waver it. I get a 3 or a 4. Either way, I get a waver here. So not the best, but it's all I really wanted. It's all I needed. It's not what I wanted. I fire off into the now missing warlock. That's because first off, I start with this prince with the cats. The cats do 7 wounds, so I finally get a like a ridiculous cat roll. They do 7 wounds to it. Then I fire, I believe I fired Blizzard at, no I didn't. Then Nyx fired at the warlock, pushing it back. It got it up to 11 wounds. I chose to go with all my archers and the tree herder into the now missing Grok's finest braves, so pop them out. So both those units are dead. In my charges, I roll pretty well to hit with these tree herders. It's not really relevant. I end up doing 2 wounds to the siege breakers though, so that's good. The other ones I believe do 2 or 3 wounds to these boomers, turning off their range attacks, so that's great. Yeah, and that's about it. Oh, before I end here, I did put these Draken Riders exactly here, so the if the Red Goblin Big Git wants to disorder them, it's not in the front, right? It'll be a flank charge. So yeah, I can turn off my flight, but I can still go directly forward. So anyway, that's the plan. I did throw some cats at this Big Git from this guy. I think I only did 2 wounds though, so not the best. This one didn't really have a vicious cat. Then we go on to turn 2. So turn 2 for the ogres, time to countercharge. They've lost 2 units, and that's sort of the problem. Again, with ogre lists here, you know, every time you lose a unit, it's kind of a big deal. And it's not particularly hard to lose units when they when you have this many bows. So anyway, they're not done yet though. So we've got the siege breakers going into my tree herders. That's probably not great for them. The Big Git that was here just decides to charge my chariots. I was thinking that they were going to charge my, or it was going to charge my wizard, but in the end it goes for the chariots instead, which is a fine bet. Then we've got the siege breakers here charging my prince. I am exactly more than 6 away right here, so there's no overrun opportunities. Nyx is not making them weakness, or not giving them weakness, so not the -1 crushing, but it wouldn't matter with siege breakers because they have crush 3 and thunder 1 right now, so the prince is getting wounded on 2s regardless. So anyway, no overrun possibility. Then we have the boomers countercharging my Shamblers, and I'm thinking that my Shamblers will probably hold for a round against boomers, but you never know. Boomers are not a gentle melee unit, right? They're still 18 dice on 4+ with brutal and crush 1. So yeah, with my opponent's shooting, you can see Grok and the dragon just sort of take the center. Again, Grok is playing pretty passively here. It might be forced to though, given the amount of shooting I have, so happens. With my opponent shooting, first off, we've got Nomar going for the Banechant onto the boomers here. Always a good bet. With 5 dice, I believe they only get 1 success, which is all they need. So these boomers now have crush 2 and vicious, so a lot better chances of taking care of those Shamblers now. Oh, and then this Big Git did charge into my Draken Riders and actually fits exactly snug against this building, so I will be pushed an inch this way after. So I didn't see that coming, but happens. With the rest of my opponent's shooting, we've got Shenron firing the chain lightning down, I believe this line, ish. I mean, oh no, it's through Nyx. That's right. So shoots it through Nyx and my archers to get them hit. It's like 1 wound to Nyx and 1 wound to the or 3 wounds to the archers. But the boomers then try to shoot at Nyx. As my opponent forgot that Nyx has stealthy. So yeah, 5+ to hit here. Not the best, not the best shots. I probably would have just gone for the archers at this point if you're gonna move the boomers forward. But that's me. Anyway, that is the end of my opponent's shooting. Obviously, I think Nyx ends up taking 3 wounds total, what these archers taking 3 wounds as well. Neither of them are wavered. And then we move to the action shot. So yeah, good shot of the painted models this time. And the end of the turn. So you can't see it because it's not appearing in frame this entire game. So the big git does 1 wound to my chariots, who are now on 2. My opponent rolls an 11 and wavers them. I could use Nyx to force a reroll there, but I decided it's just not that important, so I let it go. And then in the middle, the prince actually gets killed, and the Siegebreakers decide to do nothing, partly because Garok, or Nomar Garok, is trapped on their back here, and then they don't want to go forward. I probably would have put Nomar over here somewhere, maybe, just because the Siegebreakers probably want to back up right now. Not too far, but a little bit would be good. Just to make it so these, if this big git fails, right, my Draconriders could fly. Oh no, they can't. Yeah, so this is a good spot because the Draconriders cannot rear charge them then, even if I don't lose my flight. In the Shambler v Boomer fight, yeah, the Boomers strike hard here. They end up doing 12 wounds to me, which is pretty tough considering it's 18 attacks on 4s and 3s with Vicious, but you know, that's what happens. Oh no, they do 13 wounds to me because they brutal. They get them to double 1 down. So yep, kill them off. The big git does 2 wounds, I want to say, to the Draconrider, so turning off their flight and Thunderous, but not wavering them, thankfully. And we move forward onto turn 2 for the elves. So turn 2 elf is pretty. It's not simple with a ranged list that's chaff oriented. It's never simple, but it's simple enough. First off, I've got my sorceress or my mage moving forward to block off the charge for the Siegebreakers here from getting to my archers, who also back up, so they are this distance is greater than 6. Just to make sure that I'm not getting the overrun charge. The prince that's here was over here, whips around, like I said, blocks the other Siegebreakers looking to die. I move Nyx just to the side, I think 4.5, because I think Nyx is speed 9, but speed 9 or speed 8 is speed 8, so either 4.5 or 4 inches this way, and then pivot with my nimble, as you can see. The archers, these archers do not move at all. The tree herder backs up another 3 inches to get out of range. It's actually, I mean, it is out of range of getting charged by these boomers, but only if Shenron dies. It's more important that this distance is greater than 12 inches. So because I want to be able to fire Blizzard, and Blizzard has a dead zone. So anyway, moving back there, the Draconriders go for a frontal charge onto the boomers. I'm not too worried about this, as the boomers have 2 or 3 damage on them already, and the Draconriders are 18 attacks on 3s with elite, and then crush 2. So 3s and 2s with elite should be able to get it done there, or at least get the waiver, right? I move forward with the ASB just to diadem the big git a little bit, since you do not take individual negative for breath attacks, so it's still on a 4+ there. The chariots, which are wavered over here, just sit there, and that's about it. Let's see the action. The action shot is very similar to the normal shot, and here is the result. So oof, let's go back to this action shot. So first off, I fire the Alchemist Curse into the Siegebreakers here, who are sitting on 2 damage already. I end up doing a lot, like 6 or 7 damage. Alchemist Curse, obviously really good against Big Shield. Then I also have this unit of archers, and they are, if we go another picture back, this makes it a bit more clear. Their leader point is in the flank of these Siegebreakers, so when they fire, this unit is not far enough forward to give them cover, and I'm firing into their 4+, so it'll be 4+4+ with elite and vicious. So I do quite a few wounds there, and then finally I was gonna have Nyx. I was never gonna have Nyx shoot the siege breakers because I don't want to push them over here and just allow them to charge my archers. They actually can't charge the archers now that I think about it, even if I push them over there because there's the height 2 hill. I was thinking I was still 50%, or maybe they were, but yeah, I'd be blocked anyway. Nyx does not fire there. Nyx fires at these boomers and does a fair amount of damage, along with my blizzard doing 2 or 3, and then I spike the roll, which you can see in this picture. Boomers are dead, and the siege breakers are dead, so that's a good hit there. My wizard is not within the charge arc of Grakagamok. Again, lucky, or not lucky, but maybe some poor positioning of Grok here. But again, I'm not sure what you do with Grok against a gun line at this low points. So yeah. And on the right, you can see my diadem does not kill this little goblin. I do get a waiver though, and then the Draken Riders just run right through those boomers. So ready to reform. This is actually the end of combat. I've not reformed them yet, but I reformed them like so, I want to say, to face down the line. And that's it. Let's move on to turn 3. So turn 3 for the ogres is a pretty simple one. There's not a lot of ogres left. So if we rock some pictures back, you can see Nomar back here, right? So Nomar can see Nyx and is actually in Nyx's flank. So Nomar can go forward here, pivot here, and then nimble there, right? And get into a flank charge. So goes for that, along with Shenron going in the front. Shenron's a deadly combatant with the Thunder 2 and Crush 1. I do have weakness, so it'll be -1 on that, but still better than most of the dragons in a fight here, the special dragons at least. The siege breakers go for their second prince kill. That seems pretty obvious, and Grakagamok just runs forward here, keeping both the archers in his front. So that's that. And then the battle wagon, I'm gonna call it, moves forward. The Red Goblin Blaster, it's called. He said, remembering suddenly. Moves forward to get within, I think it's 2 inches. It's either 2 or 3 inches away from my wizard, just looking for a lucky blow up. And that'll be it for the shooting. So let's see how things go. So it blows up, does 3 wounds to my wizard, and double ones it. Always a fun thing to see. And here's the end of the turn. So yeah, it gets a double one here, or double one here, doesn't really matter. The siege breakers easily kill out that prince, and then we go into the fight with Nyx and Nomar Grok. Actually, this went first, because killing Nyx off would, it didn't matter. Again, these siege breakers are +4 to their wound roll, so it's irrelevant. But yeah, Nomar and the dragon go. They do a total of, they get Nyx up to 6 wounds, right? So they need a 10 because this ogre obviously has brutal. So they don't roll very well on these wounds, on those hit and wounds, since I mean, Nomar has 10 attacks on 5s. It's on 5s and 5s, but also vicious. And then Shenron has 10 attacks on 3s and 3s. So not the best rolls to only do 5 wounds. Although it might be. I don't want to do the math right now. So yeah, they go in, they get me up to 6, they roll the brutal. First roll is a kill, get that 10. We measure the inspiring from my tree herder. It's just barely within range, so that's called skill, guys. It was not intended. But go for the reroll. My opponent gets a 6 and a 4, which is irrelevant because first off, I make my opponent reroll the 6 with Nyx. So my opponent has to reroll it, gets a 4. That die can now not be rerolled, but my opponent can reroll the 4 and try to get a 6 and just reverse it. And so he does, because why not? Goes for the roll, gets a 5. So Nyx just barely lives with every reroll on the planet being used. So pretty fun there. My opponent wants to, I think they're pretty much dead at this point, but we play it out at least to see what turn 3 elf looks like. So turn 3 elf, I charge the tree herder into the flank of Shenron with Nyx going into the front. I whip my ASB and my Nene around this cottage sort of thing, so I can shoot down this goblin and be ready to chaff later into the center of the field. My archers again here do not have to, oh no, they do move. They crab walk this way so they can get a shot at Grok. The other archers countercharge the red goblin big git. I forgot to mention that the red goblin big git does like 1 wound, maybe 2 wounds to my archers here. It does not boxcar it, so getting that countercharge there. I whip my chariots around to also shoot at Grok. Well, that's a great arrow. To also shoot at Grok, and then the wizard, of course, turning around to get some Alchemist Curse on Grok. So after all said and done with the shooting, my ASB finally burns down. I got a new mouse, if you can't tell. So finally burns down the goblin here, so that's good. With my archers, chariots, and wizard, I end up doing quite a few wounds to Grok, which is very good, and get a waiver, which is excellent. A kill obviously is the best, but I do get that waiver. I think I got Grok up to like 10 wounds or something. I roll pretty well, obviously, which is what this game has been. So yeah, there's the action shot, and here's the end of the turn. So Grok is wavered. I do the charge on the dragon, and I roll pretty well. You can see I put him up to 10 wounds total. So the dragon Nyx is not a particularly good dragon at melee. Very effective at ranged, but only 7 attacks with only Thunderous. So 7 attacks on 3s, and then 5s to wound isn't the best. But I might have sunk 1. The Tree Herder, on the other hand, it's a flank charge, so it's rocking 14 attacks on 3s and 2s. Gets him up to 10 wounds, but only gets a waiver. It is a 17-19, so it's not that unlikely. So that's okay. Then we rock on up to the, I forgot to mention this, after killing the prince, the siege breakers have turned completely around. I think it's because I didn't take a picture of that just yet, but yeah, they had turned to face my Dragon Riders, who go into the front of them because I'm like, generally speaking, I would not do this. I would just fly off and mess around, since the siege breakers are really the only thing that can kill these dragons, and I don't need to engage them yet because they had turned fully to face the dragons. So if the dragons just go, we don't want to play, there's nothing my opponent can do. But I go for it anyway because it is a practice game, and I get 9. I end up doing 9 wounds, which again is pretty good. I have +3 to wound due to my Brew of Strength, but that's still only 3s and 3s on with Elite with 18 attacks. So 9. That's a solid roll. But in the end, I get a waiver on him, and that's about it. I think this is the last picture. It is, and that is because my opponent forfeits. We go get dinner instead, as the only thing that can activate is Nomar Garok, right? So Nomar can charge Nyx or shoot its gun. That's all it can do. Or I guess it could heal, but it's not going to do that. Nothing else can activate. So I mean, it can kind of back up, like Grok could back up over here, then Shenron could back up a little bit, and it just doesn't matter. So my opponent chooses to forfeit instead, which is fine, because the next turn, like I said, they can't really get away from me. The only thing that can really happen, Nyx regen back down to 3 wounds. So Nomar can go for a lucky kill here, if possible, but the rest of the army is going to be ready to go. I'm going to have all my shots, and it's still only going to be turn 4, so I don't even have to move my archer hordes. Yeah, so it's a bit of a dead game there, but yeah, I do think it was fun though. I mean, as far as I can remember, it was a little woozy during it, but yeah, I do like this army. It's pretty fun. I would not play it all the time though. It's a bit too shooty for me, but I don't play any army all the time. So anyway, hopefully I'll get the bases done, and then I can do a full army review soon enough. But until then, bye.